and click on the subscribe button. And all you have to do is simply put in your email address and no strings attached. It's just a basic email that will come to you every day with just a word of encouragement that you can apply in your walk of faith. And so we're so excited again that you're joining us. We do welcome you, as we do every week, to join the conversation. You can call us at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. You can also email us a question at ask@ancientfaith.com. That's ask@ancientfaith.com. Definitely take advantage of that, friends. And if you don't feel comfortable maybe sharing your name, we totally understand. We'll totally make sure that our producer keeps it anonymous. And I just want to hear from you. We truly believe in the dialogue and the helpfulness of a conversation. So again, thanks again for being with us. Tonight, we're dedicating our show to our clergy and their clergy families and the impact that they are going through on a day-to-day basis. And the studies, friends, are overwhelming about the stress that many of our clergy are going through, as well as their families. In fact, some studies are showing that there's record levels of depression, of anxiety, of burnout, of problems in marriages. And so we want to talk about with two people that are really doing extraordinary amount of research on this. But before we do this, I invited a very good friend of mine. His name is Dean Triandafilou, who may not be a stranger to most of you because he's the CEO and executive director of one of the greatest, I believe, organizations we have in our country. That's called the International Orthodox Christian Charities. It's IOCC. And I want to talk to him about really what we're seeing, especially in the earthquake that's impacted so many in Syria and in Turkey. The latest numbers, and those numbers I'm sure are going to go up considerably, have it over 45,000 people, women, men, and children, who have lost their lives due to this. And for many of us, we watch on horror on the television, on the news, seeing these people who've lost everything. They've lost their homes, their businesses, they've lost their loved ones. And we can genuinely feel helpless. How do we help them? What are some practical ways that we today can make a difference? For this reason, I wanted Dean to be with us to talk about what IOCC is doing on the ground in Syria and Turkey. And so, Dean, as always, welcome to Live with the Lows.
Thank you, brother. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Dean, let's just get started to it. I mean, it's truly heartbreaking what we're seeing in Syria and in Turkey. What are the people that you have on the ground there? What are they telling you about the sheer devastation that we're seeing there?
Yeah, it's like obviously when we heard the news of the earthquake, we checked on the staff to make sure everyone was safe and our partners. But we do have staff on the ground inside Syria, and it's been a long war. The war's been going on for over 10 years, so these people have already been affected as far as their houses, their livelihoods, the economy, and then this on top of that in the middle of winter, it's just pure devastation. It's pure devastation everywhere you turn. So you've got the staff working close with the church. Even the Patriarch John X of Antioch's been sending me pictures of the devastation, and it's incredible as far as what you see. And the images, we see on TV, these guys are living them every day.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the biggest barriers you think that is in providing aid to those areas, or are there barriers that you see?
For us, it's two tracks, right? You've got Syria and you've got Turkey. So we have a long-standing history in Syria with a strong implementing partner with as far as the Church of Antioch, and we've got staff on the ground, and we've been able to work the last 12 years or so throughout the war. So as far as they've lifted the sanctions, so it's been a little bit easier as far as getting money in, and as far as putting some plans together. As far as Syria, the obstacles are going to be the impact. Winter is going to be a long haul. We don't want to get in the way either. So when something like this first happens, we have to have the discipline, the self-discipline, not just to reach in there and try to jump, right? Because you've got to let the governments and the first responders, as far as saving lives. The role of a group like IOCC and others is to come in and to help the people who are recovering from the disaster. So one of the biggest challenges is having the discipline to hold your breath for the first 24, 48 hours. In Turkey, it's a little bit different because we don't have a traditional or an existing operating implementing partner. And so we're doing a lot of desk research, making a lot of phone calls. We have a team ready to go if the situation works out, but to identify the most responsible implementing mechanism for the response in Turkey. And again, having that discipline, as far as not just to jump in and do an emotional response, but one that makes sense for ICC to help fill the gaps, because this is going to be a long haul as far as the recovery for this one.
Yeah. I can only imagine. If you're just tuning in, we're speaking with the executive director of the International Orthodox Christian Charities, Dean Trianda Filou, about the IOCC's efforts to try to help alleviate some of the tremendous pain that is taking place in Syria and in Turkey following the earthquake that took place a couple of weeks ago, and then we just heard recently that another earthquake hit there yesterday, or it may have been on Sunday. But tell us what IOCC does in a situation like this, Dean. Like, walk us through. You said the 24 hours you tend to kind of just wait, let the first responders, the government, to kind of come in.
Yeah.
But tell us what does it look like when IOCC gets there and they begin doing their work?
So the first thing we're going to do here at headquarters is if it's in an area that our staff, we have staff or have partners, or the emergency, we have emergency lines and what have you. So, and a network, we're going to confirm where everybody is, make sure everybody's safe, as far as, because that those being as far as our resources on the ground, and then they're going to deploy as far as to the region if it's safe and if it's accessible, and they'll work with the church, they'll work with local authorities to identify the needs. As far as the immediate, we basically know the immediate needs are going to be food, water, blankets, shelter. Those are the first things you look for as far as to help people get off the ground. Then once things settle down a little bit and people are moving around, particularly in a case like this, like earlier in the intro, you said something about the number of lives lost. The region is devastated by tension and war and conflict for the last whatever years. So one of the things we're looking at is there a role we should be playing as far as with emotional, spiritual care, psychosocial counseling, as far as for the families that have been, really devastated by this. It's not just, it's compounded, after one thing after another.
Right.
And particularly in the middle of winter. I mean, these people have been struggling to begin with, and all of a sudden now, they're homeless, and so it's going to have an impact on the psychology of these folks as well. So is there something, so we're looking at that as well, as far as working with the church, because they've got some experience the last 4 or 5 years in that. But as far as for us, it's, what do we need to do in a safe way respond to fill the gap, find the needs? Is it going to be, as far as like in Turkey, there's a potential we could be supporting, an organization that's organizing grocery carts so that people can go do the shopping themselves. So that's going to be a gap, right? So we try to find the gap that we can support to keep, the programs moving as far as meeting the needs of the folks. And then, we kind of monitor the situation, as it develops. Again, is it an ambulance? There's a certain village or community needs as far as to move people around. Is it, helping to rehab a school to house 30 people, something like that. So we'll continually monitor the needs. And then on the fundraising side, you also mentioned that, which is important. There's a lot of things in the news. And, in a couple of weeks, this could be forgotten. Yeah, the quake scared a lot of people yesterday, as far as the 6.4 or something like that. They felt it as far as, Amman and Beirut. So there's a lot of tension there as far as what's going to happen next. But keeping the awareness of it, keeping people, first and foremost, your thought in people's thoughts and prayers. There's nothing more powerful than prayer. And I think that's super important, because these people are going to be impacted for years to come.
I think what you're sharing is it just paints a picture that I think for many of us in the West, we just, unless we've been in that region or really come from circumstances where we saw the plight of people suffering so much. But as you beautifully stated, I mean, this is an area that's been impacted for the last 10 years through civil war, through just the pains of just war and the impact of how it, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, financially. I mean, the last thing that they would need is an earthquake that impacted that region so terribly. So as we're looking at this, for our listeners tonight, Dean, how can we help? We talked about prayer, and I'm all about, as a priest, obviously, wanting prayer, and we should be continuously doing that, because as the Bible says, prayer works. But what else? What are some things that we can practically do if we're listening to this show right now that we can do for IOCC and their efforts in Syria and Turkey?
Well, Father, as far as just staying engaged, I mean, like you said, as far as following the websites, engaging on social media, we're still looking at, as far as, raising funds. I mean, there's a lot of things happening as far as, as far as the war, the war in Ukraine. There's potential conflict in Ethiopia. There's, there's disasters here in America. So there's a lot of competition for funding, and people are looking at what are the things they want to support. the only thing I would ask is that they prayerfully consider as far as the earthquake, because there's going to be a lot of things happening as far as recovering from the earthquake long term. We've also got our kits program. As far as people putting health kits and hygiene kits together, as far as keeping the warehouse stocked, we have working in the warehouses in Maryland. Having kits available for disasters like this. Right now, we haven't moved any kits over yet, but lots of times making sure that the warehouse is full of kits helps us in this disaster, and it helps us with other disasters, whether it's in Tennessee or Florida or Louisiana. But that'd be the tangible way to get involved, is not to forget about the kit program.
So, Dean, a listener on the show, if our listenership exists, there's people that are both within and outside the Orthodox Church, give them your website where they can go on the website if they wanted to make a financial gift to the IOCC. Where would they find that at?
Yeah, just straight to iocc.org, and on the front page you're going to see, as far as the different options, there's kind of a rolling screen. As far as the earthquake will come up, and depending on the areas of interest, you can find your way as far as to what we're doing in Ukraine as well. Still responding to Greece as far as the situation in Greece. Ethiopia, so whatever, as far as region of the world they want to learn more about what we're doing, the basics are all listed as far as the website, iocc.org.
Dean, I know you're extraordinarily busy.
And I can do that as well.
I'm sorry?
And you can do the giving as well through iocc.org.
Yes, exactly.
And the kits, you'll find the kit programs on the website as well. Super important. We've been doing those for a long time, and super important part of what we do.
So again, for our listeners, that's iocc.org. That's iocc.org. I'll tell you that Roxanne and I, this is a ministry that we definitely value. I know our church does as well. And I just would encourage you, if you're financially able, whatever it may be, to get involved with the IOCC, whether through your financial support, whether it be through prayers, but definitely make this, because like I was telling our church family on Sunday, none of us can really travel to Syria and Turkey right now, but our financial gifts can, and they can go to make a difference in the world. And so, Dean, I know you're so busy. I appreciate you taking the time to be with us, and I'd love to have you back on the show, perhaps in a couple of weeks, to kind of let us know how things are going, and what are some of the ways that we can continue to help you and the IOCC staff. But thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
No, thanks for having me. Thanks for your ministry, and you're doing a great job. Thanks, brother.
Thanks, brother. God bless, and take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So again, that's iocc.org. I encourage you again to just take efforts to do that. But before I introduce to you our new guest, I do wanted to tell you that one of the things that's so passionate to me and to Roxanne is our clergy and our clergy wives. For many people, we can see our priests on a Sunday morning deliver a sermon. We can see them when we're in our celebrate our biggest moments in our life, but also the tragedies that we face in life with deaths and people that are in hospitals, and loved ones that are in need of counseling. And sometimes, it's so difficult for a priest to kind of share what they truly need or what they're going through. And once a year, we like to take time to just simply highlight the facts on the ground about what clergy are going through. And so I invited some new friends to our show. They're Father Sean and Matushka Jennifer Levine. Let me tell you a little bit about them. So Matushka Jennifer is a military spouse and Orthodox priest wife whose various jobs have included counselor, teacher, program director, guest speaker, writer, quilter, actor, event coordinator, and painter. She volunteers her time on military posts at churches and in local community organizations. For the Orthodox Church in America, that's the OCA for those of you that are Orthodox, which is a group within the Orthodox Church. It's a church within the Orthodox Church, just like the Greek Orthodox Church or the Antiochian Orthodox Church. The Orthodox Church in America is just another. Jennifer works with clergy wives and clergy in the Office of Pastoral Life through the Thriving in Ministry program, the Synaxis program, and the Clergy Wives Advisory Group. She does a lot of work with them. And also Father Sean, her husband, who was ordained as a priest within the Orthodox Church in America, the OCA, in May of 2009. And since October of 2010, he has lived out his priestly vocation as an active duty Army chaplain. His academic career spans 34 years and includes a Bachelor of Arts in the New Testament literature with a minor in pastoral care and counseling, a Master of Arts in Theological Studies, a Master of Arts in Biblical Studies, a Master of Divinity, quite a few degrees, by the way, a Master of Science in Marriage and Family Therapy, and is currently finishing his dissertation with a Doctor of Divinity with a focus on the art of pastoral guidance. And Father Sean and Matushka, Jennifer, it is such an honor to have both of you on our show to talk about this really important topic about our clergy. So welcome to Live with the Lows.
Thank you. Great to be here.
It's great to be here. Yes.
So, Matushka, I'd love to kind of start with you and just say, what are some of the expectations that you see that are placed on our clergy and clergy wives today?
Right. Yes. I definitely feel like people look at our clergy and our clergy wives as that they are here for
Mm-hmm.
you, and that's all we do with our time. But it's not just like 9 to 5. The expectation is that you're going to be there after hours, before hours, weekends,
Mm-hmm.
holidays,
Mm-hmm.
all this time. And when you have your own family and your own kids, and a lot of clergy wives work, and some clergy work outside the home as well, outside church, there's not a lot of that free time. And then you have your
Mm-hmm.
own family emergencies that happen, and
Mm-hmm.
who's taking care of them, you know? So I think a lot of times they become overworked and very tired very quickly.
Exactly. Exactly. And, Father Sean, just as a priest, I mean, are these expectations that we see being placed on clergy, and in your research with priests within the OCA, and clergy wives, are these expectations realistic? And to be honest with you, are they achievable?
That's a great question. I think because of the shift in kind of a cultural setting, like the Orthodox priest in the village in the 1720s or
Mm-hmm.
1850s. The world has changed so much since then, and in some ways the expectations that we place on our clergy, sometimes the expectations that I feel placed upon me and my family, are more than one could possibly manage effectively
Mm-hmm.
without just writing straight off the margin of the page of one's life onto the table upon which it sits. And that's an
Exactly.
analogy that I was given by Pastor Art Dunn years
Mm-hmm.
ago when I was a Protestant person, and I've kept that picture in my mind of carrying the coffee table around with you, because the page has been written not only off into the
Mm-hmm.
margins but onto the very table. And so I think the pace of life, social media, cell phones, these kind of dynamics that have changed in our culture, in our world. Where in the world does the priest unplug? Like when is the priest off?
Mm-hmm.
And there used to be time to walk from place to place when before vehicles became the norm. We can move so quickly, we can do so much more with our time now, and the question is that healthy? And the answer that we're seeing across the board is maybe not. That
Right.
there's more to do than can be done by one person or one family.
Right. And as you were saying, I mean, the statistics are overwhelming, friends. When you're listening to this show, we think that even in life in general, we think that we kind of buy into this lie that more is better, that the more that we can do. And, just always telling people at times wearing this label of, I'm just so tired. I've got so many things on my plate. And we kind of look at that sometimes, we wear that as a badge sometimes. But what we're seeing is that in that we're operating at the edge, if not over the edge of capacity. And what's concerning, just like with lay people and clergy alike, is what we have found is that when we are tired, we tend to make mistakes. We compromise on ourselves emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, and obviously, within our families, relationally. I'd love to kind of just, in your experience, and in talking to other clergy, obviously you're coming from, you say that you came from a Protestant background. I mean, obviously what you're seeing in the Orthodox Church is not unique to the Orthodox Church. We're seeing this across the board. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, across different, even across interfaith,
Mm-hmm.
just clergy of whatever kind. I mean, I think the dynamic is appears to be the same.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I was thinking to myself early on in my own ministry, one of the hardest things that for me to do, and Roxanne used to just get so frustrated with me is, and she would say this to me, and I wouldn't know I knew what it meant, but I didn't know how to do it, and that was, how do we create boundaries, or without trying to that are healthy boundaries that are towards the church and towards the laity, that the people that are entrusted to us, by meeting their needs and caring for their needs, but also at the same time caring for our own lives. So let me ask you, Father Sean, for clergy and clergy wives, I'd actually like to ask both of you this. But let's start with Father Sean. For clergy and clergy wives struggling to meet the demands of their parish, their family, and life in general, what are some practical things that they can put into place, some healthy boundaries that they can do, that they can put into place around themselves?
Well, first, there's the overarching concept that if you're going to place a boundary, that means the boundary is there to keep something out. It's
Mm-hmm.
there to keep something from coming in, and that
Mm-hmm.
really is the word no. And quite frankly, clergy, most of us who are drawn to people helping in general, across all different fields, whether it's clergy, psychotherapy, doctors,
Mm-hmm.
nurses. So these kinds of people aren't aren't that great at saying no. And a boundary really is a no. It's a no. This is not coming in. Whatever this thing is that's trying to come in, it's going to bounce against this fence and be
Mm-hmm.
kept out. And so the first question to ask is, what's going to take the hit?
Mm.
What are we willing not to get an A+ in, so that our families stay intact, our bodies stay intact, and ultimately then our communities stay intact? Because if the clergy, takes this sabo round to the hull of the ship, and the clergy family starts to sink, it's also obviously going to impact negatively the entire community. So
Mm-hmm.
saying no to the community that you're trying to serve uh, is one of the things that keeps the clergy family healthy, which then ultimately, in the long run,
Mm-hmm.
um, beyond that momentary no, benefits the entire community. And that is so hard to see in the moment when someone's looking at you and asking something of you, to say, I'm sorry, not right now, or I'm not going to do that, or someone else needs to take care of that. I mean, that's a difficult thing to do, and most of us in the helping professions are not wired for that. So
Mm-hmm.
that's an overarching answer, I think, is to have a real vision of what a boundary does. And of course, boundaries can be a little bit flexible. You don't have to
Mm-hmm.
draw some kind of rigid kind of system, but to have something in place that repels demand, for the sake of creating some space for some rest and for some calm and for
Mm-hmm.
some relational family connecting. I know clergy that have never taken a vacation, and that find it very difficult to step out for a sabbatical or for some kind of a real, not a
Mm-hmm.
fake, I mean a real break. When I say that, when I talk to other clergy, they look at me like I'm speaking a foreign language, and it's because we're not often wired for that. So that's a practical thing too. Like, at the very least, you got to get away for a week or two, at least every year. And it's amazing, and you may know this. I know this. How quickly years can just pass by one after the
Oh,
other without some kind of
absolutely.
a legit. Yeah. So I think, knowing that the boundaries are saying, that's a way of saying no, and we're saying no not out of spite, but out of love for our families and for the communities that we serve. And I would say, I would highlight again the necessity for clergy to really take vacations, and the communities they serve would have to support that, maybe even financially. Send your
Mm-hmm.
priest away, pay for the
Mm-hmm.
family to go away, that kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. Those are two things that come to mind, and I'll stop there and let Matushka answer as well.
Yeah, Matushka, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I think it's so important that clergy are taking that time for themselves, for their own self-reflection
Mm-hmm.
and growth and just peace. And then taking that time to spend with their spouse, with their wife to work on their marriage, and then also taking that time to be with their children.
Hmm.
Because I
Mm-hmm.
think it's so easy for clergy to get caught up in their work that sometimes the wives and the kids can either get left behind or we're just running to keep up. And
Right.
we're all serving. It's not just him. The wife is
Exactly.
also serving. The kids are also serving. I mean, my kids have been altar servers,
Mm-hmm.
readers, chanters in the choir. We clean things, we iron things, we're washing things, we're cooking things, we're checking the thermostat,
Mm-hmm.
making sure the building is locked. all these little things.
I think
And
that's so important that you're sharing that. I think for a lot of people, it seems like they tend to kind of make it about the priest himself being the primary servant, or server, but it does impact the entire family. That the entire family is really engaged in leading the community, and so I think it's so important that you're sharing that. I do want to remind our listeners that you can call in and speak with Father Sean and Matushka Jennifer about how do we take care of our clergy. I mean, they're leading us, they're guiding us in our walk of faith, and yet for many of them, the studies are showing that we're seeing just tremendous amounts of burnout, struggles in their own marriages, their struggles in their own pastoral and spiritual care for themselves. So they're really struggling out there. And how can we help? How can we, as a church, make sure that we're taking good care of the leaders who are leading us in our walk of faith? So if you've got a question for Father Sean and Matushka Jennifer, feel free to call in at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. You can also email us a question at ask@ancientfaith.com. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, we are broadcasting live also on our Facebook page, The Lows. So it's LOUHS. If you're on Facebook right now, feel free to leave me a comment and I'll get to it as best I can during the show. I do want to welcome a very good friend of mine, Dr. George Koulianos, who did a great deal of work within the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese on this same topic. And I think it'd be great to kind of just engage him in this conversation. So Dr. George, are you available?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us tonight. I don't know when you were able to get on, but I did want to ask, hearing Father Sean and Matushka Jennifer, their beautiful work that they've done, and we'll talk about the work of Protodeacon Jacob Fermenko and his survey that he did within the OCA. What are some things, Dr. George, that you might add to what's already been shared that you think would be beneficial for the average listener who's listening today, that they should know about what clergy are truly going through?
So, the fundamental building block of a vibrant salvific parish is the clergy and their family. And get that, and we underappreciate that. We have, through the Clergy Family Initiative, the Ministry of the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese, we've received $2.3 million from the Lilly Endowment to address these challenges in our clergy and clergy families. And what we find is that, just as Father Sean noted, what's going on in the GOA is no different than any other denomination in the United States. Our clergy families just are pulled in a lot of different directions, far more so than ever. And one of the biggest challenges is, one, the loneliness that presbyteros experience. And that's a real issue. The peer learning groups that are being done in other Orthodox jurisdictions that actually started out as part of the Lilly Endowment, the Thriving in Ministry program, is just now getting started in the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese. Presbyteric Carrie Pappas is heading that up through a generous grant from Leadership 100. But one of the biggest challenges is economics. Clergy families are challenged financially. Many parishes aren't paying their clergymen to scale. Presbyteros, we have two data sets. One came from, they're both through Danielson Institute studies that we commissioned through Dr. George Stavros, and our sample sizes are really very large. So we know that our findings are statistically valid. And what we're finding is, because clergy have such variable hours, our presbyteros, even though for the most part are extremely well educated, they are underemployed because they don't know what father's hours are going to be, and they can't really do what they were educated to do. A big chunk of our presbyteros have master's degrees that are underutilized. So we see that. We see that the economic challenges sort of feed on themselves and impact ministerial excellence. Dr. Bloom at the Notre Dame Business School published extensively on this. It's very well done, and it's sort of a cycle that feeds on itself. And we didn't appreciate until we did our Presbytera data set how worried our presbyteros are about finances and retirement and how that impacts the home. It's it's really a big deal. So, through Clergy Initiative, we worked really hard on that, and we've been very fortunate to create our program, and a quarter of our
I think it's extraordinary what you have done, Dr. George, and really for you, Father Sean and Matushka. I mean, I know I speak for all the priests and priests' wives, and this information needs to be available. It's so important that the work that you guys are doing, and really how it's helping us. We did get an email question to you, Father Sean. The question says, "Hi, Father Sean and Matushka Jennifer. Our family misses all of you. Father Sean, being a fellow Army officer, what parallels do you see with clergy burnout and those in other leadership positions? Being a PK at a mission parish, my father worked more than one job outside of being a priest and would often come home late at night, but his one hobby was spending his time gardening, and I believe this was his coping mechanism with the stress. Are the recommendations you provide for clergy applicable to other walks of life?" Father Sean?
I think so. I mean, it's again, these maybe the parallel between military service and or military ministry and civilian ministry is the magnitude of the demand. Like these are the military and the military on the military side, the military leadership, and then the hierarchy of the church can often be equally quite demanding. You've got you're as a parish priest, you're kind of stuck between the needs of the parish and then maybe the demands of the diocese, whether that's the dean or the hierarch. Military, you've got commanding officers over top, and you've got this great swath of military members and service members and their families underneath, so to speak. Not of course in terms of importance, but just the way that it plays out. And there's the chaplain and there's the priest kind of right in the middle of all of that, trying to answer to both of those demands. And so I think that's a definite parallel, especially in the Orthodox Church, where we do have a hierarchical system, and this isn't like a free church kind of thing where the pastor is kind of the top of the tier and can kind of run things. That has its own challenges, of course.
It does. Yes.
But I think the hierarchical structures of both organizations is the same. How do you say no to that? Like, and that's really a quandary. How and when does one stand up and square one's shoulders and just say no? And it's hard to determine how to do that tactfully, and when it's just not. I think a lot of us are concerned: am I just being selfish? Or is this a legitimate place where I have to draw a self-care boundary? And just making that decision is often challenging when your mind is already tired just from the work. So I think those two things are parallels, both in terms of service in the military or ministry in the military, and then service ministry in the civilian sector.
Dr. George, did you find the same information in your studies and in your surveys with the clergy, the fear of kind of sharing or saying what they truly need?
Well, what we find is that clergy are first responders, just like physicians and ambulance drivers and on and on and on, and we underappreciate that. And they have the same challenges as any first responder does. So what we found is that our clergy, when they talk about taking an off day, the majority of the time what that means is they're working from home. Yeah. Only a minority of clergy actually take a real 24-hour off day. It's a small minority. We've also found that the majority of clergy, like Father Sean said, they don't take vacation. And the reasons why, according to our data sets, are one, financial, they can't afford to go on vacation. Two, a lack of a substitute. And three, guilt. So many clergy, when they do take vacation, leave on Sunday afternoon and come back on Saturday afternoon because they don't want to leave their parish. We underappreciate how devoted our clergy are to the spiritual being of their flock.
I love that. I love the fact that, and I think for a lot of people, for some people that are listening to this, this may be new for them because it's not something that we see on our radar. We actually have a caller, Jackie. Welcome to Live with the Lows.
Oh, thank you so much. This is Jackie Morpheus from Charleston, South Carolina.
Welcome.
This is so wonderful. And I want to say what you're doing is wonderful because you are humanizing the challenges that our clergy have. You're sharing that they have the kinds of challenges that maybe some of the parishioners are also having, finances and in their life. But so my thought here is to share a responsibility on the parish. I feel that we are one body in Christ. We're all his child. We're all his ambassador in the kingdom. We look to our clergy to have bold faith, but we are called to have bold faith too, to be prayer warriors and to care for each other. And I just feel that in my own life, and I'm not by any means comparing this to being a presbyter and the clergy, but I've done hospice, I've done caregiving, I've done prison work, and I know that Jackie can't do it on her own. I give it to God, and I'm telling you the truth. Please believe me. When I give it to God, he gives me a strength and he gives me a peace to move through. He is my shelter. He's my anchor, my shelter, my lighthouse. And I'm just reminded, too, that the kind of pressure on the clergy to be that shepherd to the flock. When Jesus said, my sheep hear my voice, I know them, and they follow me. Jesus is the shepherd. He's the bridegroom. And I feel like we might be putting so much on our pastors to be that shepherd. But if we can cultivate the depth of the personal relationship with Jesus in our heart and be that prayer warrior, be that person, have bold faith, know God's word, study God's word, we will heal not only individually, but as a church. As a church.
I love, Jackie, hearing your passion and your desire to help clergy. I know that many of the clergy that tune into our show, I'm sure, find such comfort in hearing your call to action for the church, and just for our people, laity, to realize, and clergy as well, to realize that we're all on the same team and that we need this. And I'd like to ask, Dr. George, are we living at a time where we're seeing our churches become more dependent on the clergy in ways that we haven't seen in the past, where it's, I go back to the adage of, sometimes we're living in a consumer society to where the church itself becomes a consumer-driven thing. So it's like, what can you do for me as opposed to what can I do for you? Are we seeing that more prevalent in our society today, and especially in the church?
I would only have anecdotal information on that. I don't have anything objective, but I would think so, just with technology, with the pace we're living at, our inability to up our brains. You see it in the opioid epidemic. You see it in, in burnout and on and on and on. So I tend to agree with you. We were programmed to have times where we can recreate, where we can shut down, recharge, recreate ourselves, and come back. And we're just not doing that the way we should. We're moving way too fast.
Yes. Jackie, thanks so much for calling and being part of our Live with the Lowe's show. We appreciate it. So, Matushka Jennifer, I would love to ask you, Proto-Deacon Jacob Fermenko did a survey of clergy in the Orthodox Church of America, which found that the clergy most expressed needs in the human, spiritual, intellectual, and pastoral formation of their lives, things that we've kind of been talking about. From this, though, clergy and clergy wives can ask themselves, how can I connect with other clergy and clergy wives when being vulnerable is so difficult? Can you just expound a little bit? I think that's so powerful that, for a clergyman and for a presbytera or a matushka or pastor's wife, it's very difficult to be vulnerable because you kind of not only, it's kind of like taught, it's almost antithetical to what you've been taught. And then at the same time, being vulnerable also can sometimes people can take that for granted or take advantage of that, especially in the church. What was the research that Proto-Deacon found, and your research as well, that where priests and priest wives struggled with this? I mean, how important was having someone that they can lean on in their own lives? How was that revealed?
Well, definitely, because in some of the survey results that Proto-Deacon Jacob Fermenko got back, a lot of clergy were saying that they felt very uncomfortable showing vulnerability with others, because that they don't want to be seen as like I have a weakness or I have an issue or an area where I need help, because
Hmm.
they're seeing their job as to help others. And so their focus is on others and helping with their needs. And then I know, talking with some clergy wives, I've heard clergy wives say, if we express vulnerability, like, people might look down on us, like, well, why can't you manage your children or take care of this?
Right,
And
right.
so it's very isolating. Not being able to
Hmm.
be vulnerable with others creates such a sense of isolation for people, and the clergy family feels very lonely, like there's no one that they can reach out to say, oh, I'm so tired, or I'm really struggling in this area, where they can be honest and vulnerable and receive that encouragement
Mm.
and that support that they need. And I know, like, has been mentioned before, we have those thriving in ministry groups that we've been offering for clergy and clergy wives,
Hmm.
where a lot of people are finding that opportunity to connect and to be vulnerable, that has been very life giving for our clergy and our clergy wives. And at the same time, that program is maybe not as well known by a lot of clergy. So I feel like we're trying to get the word out on that. So
Hmm.
we're hoping that more people can take advantage of that opportunity to connect with one another.
Let me ask you, and just real quick for our listeners, if you're just tuning in, we're speaking with Father Sean and Matushka Jennifer Levine. They work within the Orthodox Church in America about their doing a great deal of research in conjunction with Protodeacon Jacob Fermenko on surveying and researching the needs of clergy and clergy families, and just a lot of research that, to be quite honest with you, as we've been talking about, are not just unique to the Orthodox Church in America. We've also we see it across the board amongst all the different churches, and with even inter-religion, we're seeing that amongst clergy. And it's just something that we just wanted to dedicate at least a show a year to kind of really sharing with you the struggles that we're seeing so many people of faith struggle with and their families. And we're also so grateful to have Dr. George Koulianos, who on the last minute I told him to call in, and he did. He's just an amazing man. Does a lot of work within the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese on this specific topic. So we have two large Orthodox Church research and information that's available. And we welcome you, though, to call in if you'd like to ask us a question, or email us. You can call us at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. And you can also email me a question at ask@ancientfaith.com. That's ask@ancientfaith.com. Just as I mentioned at the top of the show, if you want to receive our daily inspirational messages, my wife and I send these out every single day at 7 a.m. If you want to receive our messages, you can go to our website at thelouhs.com. That's LOUHS.com. Click on the subscribe button. All you have to do is simply put in your email address, and every single morning you'll receive one of our daily words of encouragement, all practical and ways that you can apply it in your own walk of faith. So, Father Sean, just kind of getting back to the struggle that we see, how difficult do you feel it is, or has it been, to kind of not only bring about an awareness of what you and Matushka are doing, but also getting the clergy to get engaged in this? Because I would imagine that some clergy may be a little bit hesitant to kind of share their concerns, share their vulnerabilities, even with other clergy. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. It does go back to what we mentioned earlier, the idea that if I share, my particular weaknesses, then that might have a negative impact on the recipient of that information. I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't be surprised. And I know it's been a challenge for me. I mean, it's even tough sometimes as a priest to figure out how in the world to do confession. Like, who am I going to reveal? What brother priest or what father figure, what spiritual father am I going to be able to really just share the dark and difficult moments of my own internal workings with, and not fear being either judged or misunderstood. I mean, it's very difficult. And I think, as Matushka Jennifer pointed toward in the research, it's like this could potentially diminish my credibility.
Mm.
And so I think a lot of clergy are worried, like, I cannot afford. It's hard enough to do this job and to get these folks to be, to motivate them and to keep them on the path towards, righteousness and love of God and love of neighbor. If I can't do it, if I can't do this and be whole, then how in the world are they going to, what credibility do I have to ask them to do this, which I think really is perhaps a mistaken vision, given the fact that all of us are serving a Christ who showed strength in vulnerability on the cross, who showed us what it means to be God in the way that he died as a human being. So this is, I think it's a fear that is across many domains of people helping. I cannot demonstrate vulnerability or inability because these people are trusting in me, and I think it comes very close to Messiah complexes, to thinking that we cannot be vulnerable lest we somehow diminish our ability to be effective, like 0.0%, like 0.01%. Like where am I willing to demonstrate ineffectiveness, and how do I do that and just not lose the whole thing? And I think part of that's a legitimate concern, but I think part of it's also a bit overblown. It's a slippery slope argument. If I open the door to this, then I'll end up just being dismissed. And so I think the fact that we often have a real problem, even as Jackie mentioned, the humanity of the priesthood, the humanity of the priest's family, humanity. We're all human beings. And the clergy family is often seen as closer to God. So why would you have problems? Like, you got a priest in the house, the guy stands at the altar and celebrates the mysteries. Well, how could you possibly have issues in your marriage?
Right.
How can he not be a decent father? And so the pedestal problem is very real. And so I think convincing clergy to come off of the pedestal and that they won't lose their credibility. In fact, a lot of parishioners, and maybe there are a few out there that would be startled to know that priests are human, but most people know that already and tend to forget it because we don't show it to them. We don't let them see it. And I don't think it's going to make all of our parishioners run for the door to know that we might not always be the perfect husband, perfect father, or that we might have, that we might struggle with passions, that we might have issues and concerns, things from childhood rearing that we haven't yet dealt with, etc. I mean, I think most people would accept that, but I think that in general there's a fear across the clergy that that's not the case, that we will not be accepted.
Right. And I think too, to kind of build on what you were sharing, Father Sean, as well, is for so many clergy, I think, this notion that we talk a lot about the brotherhood or the brotherhood of the priesthood, or and what I mean that across the board, across all denominations, this kind of brotherhood, this family of clergy. Sometimes we spend so much time trying to compete with each other, so or trying to, that it's difficult to even be vulnerable, because then it shows a level of weakness that you may have. I remember I was counseling a priest, a couple months back, and this issue kind of came up, that he's just like, when I look on social media and I'm looking at what this priest is doing at his parish, and he's doing all these different things, I look at myself, it's like, how can I share with them, what my concerns are, what I'm struggling with, when I'm looking at them and they're doing so much great work. And, I think that it's almost there's a struggle vertically, sometimes and share, and having the confidence to share, with hierarchs that, hey, I'm going through this. I really need some help. I need some guidance, but also horizontally, in the sense that, with fellow clergy and, laity that are in the parish. Dr. George, I wanted to kind of just ask you the same question. I mean, did you, in the research that you guys have done, which was a tremendous amount of research that was done, did you find it difficult for priests to kind of come forward and to share what they were truly going through, not only for themselves, but also for their wives?
So, can you hear me, Father?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So, what we found really hit home very beautifully with the Parish Council nominee training video series that we did.
Mm-hmm.
That series is on the Archdiocese website under the Clergy Family Initiative, and it hit so close to home that many clergy, when they watched it, were just deeply moved, many to tears, but they were too embarrassed to show it to their parish. So not every clergyman is using it because it shows clergy to be vulnerable. And that is that's really, it speaks just right along with what Father Sean and Presitana were saying, But what we need to do in our parishes is we need to do it in three places actually. First is we need to let our clergy families know that in our parish that there are safe spaces, that it is a judgment-free zone, and that they're allowed to be human beings with the same challenges, the same feelings, the same pains that everyone else in the parish has. The second is allowing clergy to participate in these peer learning groups. Although it takes a while for clergy and presbyteros to open up, the peer learning group doesn't kick into gear for a little while. It could take months or a year or two before people break down the walls and really open up. But once they do, and the longer they're in the peer learning group, what data from the Lilly Endowment has shown is that the parish is more vibrant. So it translates into a healthier, more vibrant parish. The other point that's really important is I had the privilege of traveling all over the country, speaking in every metropolis, spoken to over 3,000 parishioners over the last 5-6 years. And every time I do a presentation, everyone answers the same way, and that is, I wish we would have known sooner. We have parishes with beautiful parishioners and wonderful clergy and clergy families who are all well-intentioned, who just didn't know. But now that people know, things are starting to change. And we're sort of at the cusp of something very special going forward, I think, in our churches as we continue to raise that awareness through sharing our data sets, be it the OCA or the GOA or the Baptist Church or the Evangelical Church. The data sets all mirror one another. There's actually a new study that, if there are any clergy that are on, that the Danielson Institute is getting ready to start now. They sent out an email just recently on just these emotional challenges that clergy are facing. So for those of you who are clergy and want to participate, I urge you to get involved in that. It's all strictly confidential. The findings are anonymous, and they're under lock and key at the Danielson Institute at Boston University, and no one knows anything about any individual response.
That's excellent. We just got this email message from someone that wants to remain anonymous. They say this: the nicest thing that some of our parishioners did was to send me to a Matushka's retreat, basically a pastor's wife retreat. They paid for the airplane flight and everything. Also, another parishioner was to pay for my 3 children to go to a youth rally camp one summer. It helped so much. Thank you for bringing this talk to all. You know, I think in the last few minutes of our show, Father Sean and Matushka Jennifer, I'd love to kind of let you have the last word. I love what Dr. George was sharing. I think it's so powerful and very practical ways that we can all be helping our priests and our pastors and clergy wives and their children. But, you know, what are some things that you would leave us with? What are some practical things that if a listener is listening to our show right now, they go to a church, for a lot of them, they're like going, yeah, this all makes sense. What can I do? What would you say are some practical things they can put into place right now?
I would say if people could actually go and talk to their clergy couple and find out, like, what kind of practical needs do you have? And are there people in your parish that could step up to help meet some of those needs, like maybe babysit your kids so you can go on a date, or express some type of appreciation gift for you to, go on a weekend trip or something. Or like she's saying, send your kids to summer camp. But find out what those particular needs are for your clergy family. Because sometimes laity might be afraid to ask, and don't be afraid to ask. I would encourage you, ask them, talk to them.
And Father Sean?
Yeah, just to continue that in that vein, a lot of parishioners this has been found through some of the research that other organizations have done. Some parishioners never think to ask their clergy what they need because they look at their clergy family, and the clergy family looks like a superstar. Like, our clergy are competent, often very competent people. And in that competence, they will overperform. And so laity aren't always quite clear where to get involved because the clergyman and his supporting element, his family, they're just doing so much so well. And the assumption is, well, I guess we're good to go, and the reality is, many clergy are deeply conscientious men, and their families are deeply conscientious. They love God, and they're trying to serve, and so they're going to do the best they can, even if it means writing off the margin onto the desk. So just because the clergy family, just because the parish seems to be firing on all cylinders and it's all full steam ahead, everything's great. It's great until it's not. And so if it looks like everything is going stupendously, it's still worth asking, because there may be things that the priest and or his family are doing that maybe they shouldn't be doing. And it's okay to tell a priest, hey, knock it off. Like, give that to somebody else. We'll take that. Like, we recognize you're super competent. You're obviously doing very well, and you're leading us in wonderful ways. But it doesn't always look obvious that there's a need, as Matushka Jennifer was saying. So ask anyway. When you get the standard answer, everything's fine, we got it. You say, no, Father. Like, what can you give to someone else? What can we take from you? What should we take from you, so that you can say no to that? And then you get the second layer of, no, I think everything's going to be fine, and we got it. No, we're serious. Like, we're going to make the assumption that you're doing too much. And so let's figure out what you need to do as our priest, and what your family needs to do in support of that ministry. And then what we need to do to take all the other things, or many of the other things that you might be doing so very well, off of your plate. I think people would have to be rather intentional, and maybe a little bit assertive, and possibly forceful, to get into that vein, and to make sure that their priests and their priest families are not just by default overperforming. As Jennifer said, I agree wholeheartedly. Ask, but then be ready to press in and lean into that question. And don't let the priest get off easy with, oh, everything's great. Make that a formal assessment, and see what might be able to be done to practically help that family.
I agree. And I think for the clergy, in the last few seconds of our show, I do want to just encourage our clergy to have someone that you can talk to, have a brother priest that you can communicate with. Make sure that you're taking time out every single week to grow spiritually. Christ told us one of the commandments was to honor the Sabbath, and our Sabbath isn't the typical Sabbath, because we oftentimes are at church on that Sabbath. But make sure that you have your own Sabbath every single day. Make sure that you're continuing to grow, every day faithfully, and also being sure that you're taking time to do things that that help you. I'm a big proponent of health, and I do a lot of like running and riding bikes and going to the gym. It's just helpful for me. I think that it's so important to have that. I just encourage all of our listeners to make it a point to just lean into your clergy, as both Father Sean and Matushka Jennifer and Dr. George have all been mentioning. Look for ways to make a difference in their lives just by communicating to them and telling them how much they mean to you, but also looking for ways that you can take and alleviate some of the stress that they're carrying. I do want to thank all of you, Father Sean, Matushka Jennifer, and Dr. George, for being on this show tonight. I'm so grateful that you're all able to be with us to discuss this really important topic.
Thank you so much for having us.
Absolutely.
Indeed.
And next Tuesday, friends, we're doing a special show on a very, very difficult topic that we've never done on this show, and that is we're talking about divorce. How do we help people who are going through a divorce? And maybe you're one of the people that are going through a divorce, or you've been through a divorce. What is the church's stance on that? How do we help guide people through that? And how do we provide comfort? We're going to be speaking with some extraordinary people on this topic. Roxanne will be with me on next Tuesday's show, so I definitely encourage you all to be with us. That's next Tuesday, the very first day of March, and be with us on this topic on comforting those who are going through a divorce. Once again, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks to Matushka Trudy for producing tonight's show. As always, everyone, God bless you and stay strong in your walk of faith.
Father Nick and Dr. Roxanne are the authors of the book Renewing You, a priest, a psychologist, and a plan, which can be purchased at store.ancientfaith.com. Their daily inspirational messages can be found at thelows.com/subscribe. Be sure also to search for The Lows on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Live with The Lows is a listener-supported presentation of Ancient Faith Radio.
Hey, Father Tom, how are you?